Hey guys, it's Dan O'Donnell again. Hey, I had a couple people want to know more about making the board game that I made, which is called Better Me. If you're curious about the game itself, it's bettermegame.com. But a couple different people commented and said, I'd like to know about the process of making that game. And I think mostly what they meant is the process of going to China, or being in contact with China, whatever way you want to do it. I went there, and figuring out the manufacturing process. How did I choose a manufacturer? I'm sort of guessing about the details that people want to know, but I don't think they care a whole lot about designing the game, and testing the game and all that, because I think they want to know what could apply to their products, whatever it is they're doing, physical products from another country, specifically China. So I'll get into that a little bit. The idea, I had that down on a Google Doc for years with really no idea how I would actually make it happen. I'd never designed a game before, and I'd never produced a custom product before. I used to run a flea market, and we sold everything, everything from bicycles and kayaks to, jewelry and shotguns and rifles and clothing and used jeans and shoes and surfboards and whatever. But so I knew a lot about materials and where things came from and stuff, but I had never gone through the process myself with a manufacturer. I'd never been to China before. So I went ahead and got my Chinese visa in Chiang Mai, which is a really easy process. I got a 10-year visa. I think it cost $130, and I didn't even know they gave a 10-year visa. It was right when they started doing that, and I think it was only for Americans at that time anyway. But yeah, I showed up to pick up my visa. I was only going for about a week, so I didn't really care how long it was for, and the lady said, okay, here's your 10-year multi-entry visa, which I was like, wait, you mean, like I can renew this every year or something? She said, no, you're good, 10 years. And I said, okay, but I have to pay more each year? And no, $130 for a 10-year visa, no catch, which was awesome. So I got on a plane and flew to Hong Kong. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. The first thing I did was, I had already created this kind of rough draft game on a piece of paper, with pens and highlighters, and tested it a bunch. So I started looking for groups of people that could help me understand how to actually produce a game. And I remember finding a Facebook group of New Zealand board game creators, of all places, and I joined it and said, hey, sorry, I'm not in New Zealand. I've never been to New Zealand, but I'd like to learn from you guys if that's cool. And so I posted a bunch of questions there. And I was completely clueless about the whole process. And it turned out I didn't really find a lot of people there who had gone to China or worked directly with a factory in China. There are other sites like thegamecrafter.com where people produce prototypes and things. And a lot of people produce games as sort of a hobby, to play with their friends and stuff. But anyway, I wound up finding other websites like Board Game Geek where you can do a lot of research about different games. And I basically put a bid out on Alibaba. And Alibaba, if you don't know what it is, it's a site that connects whoever with a bunch of manufacturers in China. And so you can say, I want to make, coffee cups, and I'm looking for bids, and you get barraged usually with a bunch of bids from people that may or may not really be good at making what they're bidding on. So you have to really sort through all that. So I got, probably 20 or 30 plus bids that seemed like, okay, these people might actually be able to produce a board game. And I had to kind of go through those, and I saw that most of them were concentrated around the Shenzhen area, which is near Hong Kong, or they were concentrated in the Ningbo, Shanghai area. So I thought, okay, I think what I want to do is just pick one of these two areas and go there and meet with everybody that seems legit. So I narrowed it down, and it looked to me like Shenzhen was a little better overall. I was getting better bids, and the company seemed more credible. So I booked a flight to Hong Kong, which is right next to Shenzhen, and then I went over to Shenzhen basically with 3 meetings lined up. So my top 3. And one of them, my gut was telling me one of them was standing out as being more experienced and higher quality products and everything. So I met with them first. And what we did, we just sat down at a table in their office, their sales office, not the factory. But they had copies of tons of different games that they had made and card sets. In the board game business, companies tend to make board games, cards, like cards only, playing cards, poker cards, whatever cards, and then and puzzles is common. So basically anything made out of cardboard or paper. They can make gift bags, like, that you would get at a fancy store. Just boxes. People buy just boxes for whatever their product is from these guys too. So anything that's like in a board game box, they know something about it. And they don't produce, the factory I ended up working with, they don't produce like the little plastic pieces or the dice, but they source those from guys who do like injection molding or whatever it is they need to do to produce those other pieces, like sand timers, for example. So they helped me source all that. I didn't have to go look for the sand timer manufacturer separately or the dice manufacturer. That was all handled through my agent at my factory. So anyway, again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I met with the first company who I thought would probably be the best. Everything was cool. The pieces looked great. They had a bunch of parts that I hadn't thought about and like different shapes of cards and things. I went with a bigger die than I had anticipated because it just kind of stood out, made the game look more quality. And I just had a good feeling about it. And at the end of the meeting, King, my rep, he said, okay, so any more questions? I said, no, I think I got everything I need, and he said, okay, well then, basically he was kind of sticking his hand out, like, do we have a deal? Are we ready to work together? Because they had already given me a bid, and it was competitive. It was right there with the other two that I was meeting with. And I said, well, actually, and it was a little awkward moment for me, because it was my first trip to China. It would have been awkward in any situation, but I don't really know the culture, and I just said, well, I do have 2 other meetings lined up this week, so I need to go meet with those companies and see what they have to offer. But I did really like our meeting today. I thought you guys have very nice products, and I appreciate all the help. And he said, oh, okay. And, in the 30 minutes before this, I had changed my mind on a few components. Like, instead of the poker-size cards, I wanted the taller, thinner cards. They were just a little different. I just thought different is good. And the bigger die that I mentioned. So we had already agreed that he would update me, give me a new quote that evening by email. So, we shook hands and I said thanks, and and he said, okay, well, I'll get you that quote. And I actually expected the price to maybe go up just a little bit because the die was a little nicer. I think in that meeting I also chose a different sand timer, which only comes from one supplier. It kind of just looked cool, basically. It kind of fit the theme of the game, but I thought it's probably going to cost a little more. So I was expecting the bid per game to go up like a matter of cents. If I had to guess, I'd be like, oh, it'll be maybe 5 cents on the dice and maybe, I don't know, 3 to 5 cents on the sand timer, and the cards might cost a little bit more, so maybe the bid will go up, I don't know, 50 cents, 30 cents, something like that, who knows. But I got the bid later after telling him I had other meetings coming up, and the bid came down. And I don't remember the amount that it came down, I'd have to check, but it was significant. Like, his bid got better. And it would make sense to me. It seems like that was due to me telling him he had competition. So then I went to the 2 other meetings, and one, basically the company did a really nice job with cards. They showed me their samples, and their card packs looked great. But the board games they just showed a couple examples of the game boards themselves, and they were really bad. One, when I sat it on the table, it wouldn't lay flat. The edges were kind of like warped and askew, and like corners were not touching the table. And I thought, wow, if this is the one they chose to show me as an example, like they didn't even try to get an example that looked good, right? So what's my actual game going to look like? So basically they were just out at that point. Just there's no way I could work with them. Cards only, maybe, and their bid was competitive, but it seemed to me like they were a card company and maybe like a box company or whatever, pretending to do board games or like trying to get into it maybe, and I would probably be the guinea pig. So they were out, and the third meeting that I went to, that I thought I had set up, I went to the address they had given me, and there was no company there. And there were restaurants and little shops, and I'm asking around like, hey, do you know where the paper company is, the board game company, and puzzles, and there was a language barrier, so I was trying to ask these people, have you seen anybody making stuff like this? And I even resorted to walking down the alleys. I thought, I know, if there's a paper company on this street, if I walk down the alley, I'm going to see like big recycling bins or something full of like pieces of cardboard and paper. Nothing. So I contacted them. Basically, they got back with some excuse about, oh, sorry, we're moving our office today. just, it was excuse after excuse. And basically what I was warned about ahead of time and what seemed to be going on is this is a middleman. This is a trader or a trading company, maybe, probably just an individual, I think, who was trying to pose as a manufacturer. So thinking I would probably never come to China, if he gets my business, he'll just go to, who knows, maybe the same factory I was dealing with and try to get himself a commission, a markup, and just be the middleman. And honestly, I have no problem with a middleman. I mean, I was a real estate agent for years, and I put different kind of real estate deals together. And at the flea market, I was buying and selling stuff. I was in the middle, like that sometimes. But just be upfront about it. Just tell me, hey, I'm a guy who already knows all the factories, and I speak Chinese, and I can help you, and you don't, have to run around and get all the different bids. I'll do that for you. I know people who work with agents that do that, and it's great. But just tell me, don't pretend to be a factory and then have me go to some address that doesn't exist. So obviously that guy was out, and unbeknownst to King, he had given me a better bid, and then also the competition proved to not be up to par. So they were the best option and the best priced option. And so I went back there, met with him again, and said, okay, we have a deal. And he was really happy about that. We shook hands. He's a commissioned sales guy. And so he was great, happy that we had a deal. And he said, okay. And this was the funny part. He said, let's go to Starbucks. I said, all right, and I was glad that I didn't have the experience that I had heard about, where basically the factories go out and try to get you drunk, and then, you're hungover the whole time you're in China, and they try to get you to sign contracts while you're drunk and all that. That was kind of my nightmare scenario. It didn't happen at all. Nobody tried to do that to me. After we made the deal, and after we did the Starbucks trip, the boss man did take me out for a nice dinner. He didn't even order a drink, so it was great. But anyway, King says, let's go to Starbucks. And I told him, oh yeah, Starbucks, that's from where I'm from. It's from Seattle. I grew up just down the road from Seattle. And he got his Frappuccino. But when I asked him, what are you going to order? He said, I don't know, I've never been here. And so it was his first experience at Starbucks. The guy makes about $500 a month. And, this is like a $4 coffee, so you're not going to do that very often, obviously. But he orders his Frappuccino. When he took his first sip, his eyebrows went up. He goes, oh, it's so good. It's so good. And it was comical, man. I did not expect that kind of reaction, and I'm sure it was good, but he was like really excited about it. And I think it was genuine, but part of me was also saying, is he just pretending to love it because it's from Seattle and he wants me to think that, Starbucks is great because it's from near my hometown? But to summarize my experience in China, it was not as big of a culture shock as some people had warned me. And say, oh man, you got to be really careful about how you do everything. Or like when you hand a Chinese person a business card, they receive it with both hands and look at it and study it. They show that they value it, right? And I screwed that up. People would hand me their card and I grab it with one hand and say thanks and put it in my pocket and oh wait, yeah, I was supposed to look at it. But they cut you some slack. They know you're not Chinese. And as long as you're trying to be a nice guy, I think I didn't make any major missteps that I know about. So I think people kind of are a little too worried about that, maybe. Or maybe it's just I got lucky on my first trip, who knows. But anyway, those are my 3 meetings. That's how it wound up. I got the tour of the factory as well. The owner took me there, and that was really interesting to see it. So if you're thinking about making stuff in China and you're considering going, I would say definitely if you can do it, do it. It's a good experience, and I think they take you more seriously when you show up, probably. I mean, I would. If I had a factory and a guy actually came over, I would go, okay, this guy's for real. He's not just wasting my time with emails. He's going to do something, and I want to win his business. So I think it's worth it from a business standpoint, and it was also interesting and fun just from an experience standpoint. Let's see, what else do I have on my sheet? This video is getting long. Sorry about that. 3 meetings. Inspection. A lot of people ask about inspections. I did have an inspection. Basically what happens is you're expected to pay 30% down. That's pretty typical. It can differ a little bit, but 30% I think is the most typical. So I did that. I wired over 30% of the total cost, and then the production happened, which took a few weeks. And then when it was done, I hired an inspector. And at this point, I was back in Thailand, back home in Thailand. And so my inspector went there, took a bunch of pictures, told me exactly how many flaws were on the units, very detailed report. And so that happened before anything was shipped out and before I paid the remainder. So I would recommend that, especially on your first run with a given company, given manufacturer. So that's about $130 or $40 I think I paid. Some places do it for cheaper, like around $100. But this was a personal referral that I had from a guy who had used this inspection company, and to me the difference of $30, in knowing what I'm getting and having a friend who's happy with the company is well worth it. Also, if you want some help with this, a friend of mine owns a company called Guided Imports, and they do all of this. They help people source. They'll find the right factories. They'll get samples sent to you. They'll help you with set up the inspection. They'll help you with shipping. I've only used the company personally for shipping, but it was really good. Their communication was great, and everything went smoothly, and I shipped some games to Dallas using them. So again, that's Guided Imports if you want to get an agent on your side helping you with that. And there are, of course, other agents, but I was happy with that one in particular. So let's see, anything else on my sheet? If you guys have other questions, if I'm missing anything, feel free in the comments to ask, or I might even make another video if you have another kind of big topic related to this. But hopefully that kind of helps you guys out. Basically, China wasn't as scary as I expected, and my experiences have been good so far. I've only dealt with one manufacturer so far, so maybe I got lucky and found a great one on the first try, and maybe other people it might take a couple tries. But you got to swing the bat if you're ever going to get a hit, right? And once in a while you might hit a home run. So get out there, make something happen. And one of my favorite sayings, you can't wait till all the lights are green to leave the house, right? So I started making the game when I had never designed a game before, didn't really know much about that or anything about that. Just started reading and learning and jumping into forums and groups. And I didn't know anything about China, the country, and I didn't know anything about manufacturing, any manufacturing, let alone in China. So it was a big learning process, but I learned a lot. It was actually a fun process. Once in a while it was a little intimidating. Like getting on the plane and going to China, it was intimidating. But, I've done things before that I was intimidated by, and they worked out. So I was just like, all right, just take the next step, one step at a time. Go to the first meeting. If you screw up the first meeting, you'll learn something and hopefully do better in the second one. So don't wait till all the lights green to leave the house. And if you have any more China questions or questions about anything else you think I might be able to, help you out with, let me know. And if you're interested at all in the game, go check it out, bettermegame.com, and have a good day. Hope this was helpful, everybody.